It's easy to forget, especially living as we do in an age where nobody seems to care about history all that much, that democracy as we know it, in the grand scope of human civilization, has existed for around 5 minutes or so. Sure, there were ancient societies where the concept of democracy existed. The Athenian Republic lasted a few hundred years. The Roman Republic lasted half a millennium. But that democracy is not democracy as we know it today. Those democracies had very restrictive standards on who was allowed to do the voting. Democracy as we know it today means universal suffrage, the broadest possible eligibility criteria, and we take it for granted, at least most of us do, that high voter turnout is automatically preferable to low voter turnout. But if you traveled back in time, let's say 22 to 25 centuries, and you went up to one of those Greek or Roman republicans and put it to them that true democracy means every adult citizen, male and female, gets the vote, they would have looked at you like you had a penis growing out the middle of your forehead. And you would have gotten that exact same reaction even right up until the middle of the 19th century. Universal suffrage, well, universal male suffrage, more specifically, was never seriously proposed anywhere in the world until the 1850s and 60s. In the United States, we didn't have universal male suffrage until the 14th Amendment in 1866, and it's another half century before women's suffrage starts to be seriously contemplated. And here's where we have a real problem in our current day discourse, where the Twitterization of the public intellect has rendered us pretty much completely incapable of having nuanced discussions about complex, multifaceted topic, because we just want to jump to wild conclusions and call people names. As an example, consider this next sentence I'm about to say. We would do well to consider the unintended consequences that have resulted from universal suffrage. Many people, and I'm sure some already have, will infer that sentence as me stating my belief that universal suffrage is a bad thing, or that it should be reversed. But did I say that? I did not. Did I intimate that? I did not. Did I think that? I do not. But here's what I do think. I think sometimes we get so caught up in congratulating ourselves for doing the obviously correct thing, like granting the vote to all adult citizens, that we prohibit ourselves from acknowledging, much less discussing, that doing the correct thing might have ancillary consequences that we don't like so much. And we also prohibit ourselves from acknowledging, much less discussing, that down through the centuries and the millennia, there might have been good, proper, sensible reasons why certain people didn't want to do the thing that we view as being so immutably morally correct. So before universal male suffrage, in other words, the whole history of democracy up to the 1850s, what were the main arguments against it? Well, the main arguments against it were, number one, if we limit the voting to educated male landowners, then we will have a more literate, more well-informed electorate that makes better decisions. And number two, if we let poor people vote, then they're just going to vote for whoever is offering the most lavish free handouts from the government. Now, is either of those reasons a deal breaker why we shouldn't let all male citizens vote? No, of course not. But does that mean both of those arguments are wrong? No, of course it doesn't. There's a lot of correctness in both of those arguments. And similarly, with women's suffrage, if you go back before the 1920s, a century ago, in other words, what were the main arguments against giving women the vote? Well, the biggest one went something like this. If we allow women to vote, we will have an electorate that is more easily swayed by spurious appeals to emotion and less governed by rationale. Now, is that a valid reason to deny women the right to vote? Of course it isn't. Hell no. But is it something we can dismiss out of hand? I think anyone who's been paying attention to politics the last 3 or 4 decades can see that our political messaging, in addition to what we used to call our news coverage, they are more emotion-oriented today than they have ever been at any time before, and we would have to be self-deluding morons to not realize and acknowledge that much of that reality goes back to giving women the vote 100 years ago. And there's another big component in that equation too, the fact that 75% of journalism degrees are now being awarded to females. So in a period of 50 to 60 years, the news business goes from 95% male to 3/4 female, and we're supposed to pretend that's not going to cause drastic, far-reaching changes in the industry? And again, just so we're clear on this, I am not saying universal suffrage is bad. I'm not saying women shouldn't be news reporters. I'm saying good things sometimes have adverse ramifications, and we can't fix them if we pretend they don't exist. Jim Eagle, hit the music, please.